Georgie, it's great to have you in the studio and a welcome back to Frazer Jones.
Thank you.
We're here today to talk about talent, retention and culture and some of the evolving trends that we're seeing as we move into 2025 and I suppose what we saw across 2024, which we know for some businesses was incredibly challenging. So Georgie, great to have you here today. What were you keen to find out?
I think just kind of on the piece that you were just talking about there, I'd love to know kind of what the key evolving trends you've found in 2025 so far across this mid to senior market.
It really does depend on the level that we're hiring at. I think we've moved into 2025 and we've certainly seen a massive shift in comparison to last year. But with that, there's a massive emphasis on retention and the culture across organizations. What we have noticed is, particularly across sort of our buy-side boutique market, teams are incredibly lean. They're working super hard. Everybody's kind of pulling their weight forward. They're kind of running through brick walls together. But what that does mean is businesses are being slightly more cautious around burnout. So they're thinking, how are we looking after our individuals? What are we doing to make sure that we're showcasing that we care about them? What's their development journey look like? And that's where we've been on hand to kind of map out what talent development offerings might look like, succession planning, learning and development. And I think that's where towards kind of Q4 of last year and as we've moved into Q1, there has been an emphasis on hiring in sort of talent and development and a lot of coaching around senior leadership because we know that times have changed. And I think, moving on to your market shortly, Georgie, we look at our millennials now and the slightly more junior market, we know that culture for them is so much more important than it maybe was 10 years ago. Kind of shifting on to you in the market that you look after, what are you seeing across the slightly more junior level and what do they want from workplaces as we move into 2025?
I think the main things for juniors is those who are super passionate about HR is just to kind of get their sleeves rolled up and get involved in as much of the HR function as possible, sort of not to be pigeonholed too much at this point in their career. I think obviously the kind of hybrid workings point is fairly important to them, being used to the sort of new COVID world now, that being a bit of a main focus. However, there are a lot of candidates out there, especially within the financial services world, that are still just really passionate about getting involved in as much as possible, and whether that being in the office or not. They're really open to that. So that's probably a main key trend that I found so far.
Yeah. So I suppose that's the emphasis on workplace flexibility, which I think we all are almost kind of bored of the word hybrid. But for any clients out there that might be listening, the standard for us, particularly in financial services now, is businesses are moving to a slightly more in-office culture. Yeah. It's 3 to 4 days. And from a personal perspective, the younger generation that want to learn and understand from some of the most successful HR professionals in the world, you've got to be sat next to them. You've got to listen to them. Yeah. If we talk a little bit about retention, it's a good time to talk about it, right? We're missed comp round for a lot of organisations, but equally a lot have finalised that now. And I suppose I'm pleased to share that the majority of organisations we've worked with have paid pretty well out in bonus. Mm-hmm. I think where, I suppose, organisations haven't decreased, but again, they are slightly more leaner teams. Our high-performing individuals are absolutely being rewarded. Yeah. I have noticed with some of our slightly larger, more matrix organisations, they're bringing in a little bit more around LTIP, which for slightly senior professionals that want to be with an organisation for 3, 6, 9 years and on a bit of a journey, it's a great way to keep those individuals. Mm-hmm.
When speaking about the senior market, how do you think more recently the role of leadership has changed?
I think one of the first pointers is empathetic leadership and tailoring your leadership to your needs of a team. We were quite lucky at Frazer Jones not long ago that as a management population to get some training around how we adapt our style to different individuals in businesses. And I think people really do need something different from their senior leaders. And it's really, really important that we're still focusing on that trust and autonomy element. I think particularly our incredibly ambitious candidates are always asking and always talking about how much autonomy do I have to run with that particular project. And I think where we've seen a bit of a fallback is individuals that haven't necessarily got honest feedback from senior leadership. Mm-hmm. And that feedback has been shared way too far gone. So I think when we're talking about, again, talent development, learning and development, investing in our people, it's making sure that we're empathetic towards our workforce these days. There is trust and autonomy, and the feedback is given in time. I think those individuals that are doing so in senior leadership positions have ended up flourishing. They've managed quite large scale teams, but equally you may have a team of one or two direct reports. And I think that's really, really important to almost empower your workforce and give them a trajectory. All of a sudden you have an individual that is incredibly excited about something they might have achieved, but they've almost got a bit of a pointer of, okay, I really need to focus on that. So my next 3-month goal is to ensure that I've completed X by Y. Mm-hmm. You've been incredibly busy over the past 6 months since returning back to Frazer Jones, which has been an absolute delight, by the way. Obviously, again, we're focusing back to a slightly more junior population now. So what do you predict the trends to be as we move into 2025 for the market that you cover?
I think the main things are that the roles as a whole have kind of evolved. Mm-hmm. I think generalist pieces of just doing kind of administration and then going into the kind of advisory and business partnering and being very people facing isn't really a thing anymore. Mm-hmm. I think we're finding kind of the roles almost merged due to the more lean teams that we're finding across the financial services world. A lot of candidates are more involved and more interested in the sort of systems-based stuff and the data side of things and really understanding HR from kind of the back office to a certain extent, and there being a lot more of kind of merging themes throughout there and the sort of client-facing stuff, I suppose you want to say.
Yeah, I would harmonise that, and I think that's why, particularly towards the end of last year, we worked in junction a lot with our payroll and our HRIS teams here at Frazer Jones, just because that need for real operational specialists were absolutely there. I think, previously it would be quite a general, we'd love somebody with a bit of Workday experience or success factors experience, but actually there's a much more of a deeper dive now when we're hiring to HR operational teams. And they're like, listen, we want somebody that not only understands the front end of that system, but the back end as well. Yeah. And that's when you're going into slightly more niche roles, but those individuals still have to know how to run an onboarding process end to end and for it to flourish and strive across quite a matrix organization. Shifting back to the slightly more senior market, a massive focus for us has been employee relations, which is a bit of a breath of fresh air in some ways. We've not seen a huge shift in employee relations over the past kind of 18 months. I think, again, if we look at the economy, if we look at changes in employment law, and we look at businesses almost protecting themselves and their people, we're finding there's more of a shift of not just employee relations leaders that can manage high volume of casework, but actually those leaders that can define the people strategy and how a business move forward when we're looking at employee relations. How are we coaching our managers? Realistically, do we need an employee relations advisor sat in on a meeting of a manager speaking to their employee around a PIP? Absolutely not. What are businesses doing from a coaching perspective there? How are they streamlining things? So for us, we've had a couple of really niche and quite meaty roles in a slightly more strategic space of employee relations. And they're working in harmony with the people advisory team, the regulatory teams, rather than just the business partners that they might have supported before. Mm. So interested to hear whether that continues to strive.
What are your predictions for 2025 in regards to the kind of mid to senior market?
So I think as a bit of a round off of kind of conversations today, we've gone into 25 incredibly positive. We know that people were burnt out from last year. It was a tough gig. We still did, incredibly well as an organisation. I think that's down to the fact that we are niche. For us, it's about a personalised service. It's not just about recruitment. It's about advising businesses. And we'll continue to do that as we move into this year. We've got, a network of incredibly experienced people that know HR and know the financial services world inside out. And I think being able to harmonise and work across permanent and interim together, utilise our payroll offering, our HRIS offering, naturally, we're going to sprint this year and we're going to do really well. The noise is there. We're partnering with some incredible senior leadership, defining what their teams need to look like this year. So I'm incredibly excited. So on that note, we are going to go and deliver a retainer for a client. Thanks, Georgie.